So people know my background from yesterday's speech, that my real specialty is artificial intelligence and robotics and redefining what human beings will be in the future. And a lot of people find this scary. I don't want to be redefined. I don't like this idea, something that's beyond my control. The very sense of self is going to be altered. Well, you're actually under a lot of control systems, and you have been since birth. Indoctrination, how did you learn to speak the language that you speak? What's etiquette? How do you know how to behave in society and culture? So you've been indoctrinated. There are a whole bunch of forces that are controlling you and manipulating you at any time. So there's this field called cybernetics, and I'm going to define it as Wikipedia defines it, but it's a notion that we are not separated from machines. We're actually systems. And so it's a concept that we are all part of an economic system, we're part of a tribe, part of a culture, and that even bionics or other human augmentation, that was my speech yesterday, is still part of us. So let me define cybernetics for you. So the man who actually defined the word, created it in 1943, was a guy by Norbert Wiener. Same time the CIA was created, by the way. But the science of control and communication in the animal and the machine. Now, there are many definitions of cybernetics. I think I read about 71 of them before creating this presentation. And many individuals who have influenced the definition of direction of cybernetics. So the man, Norbert Wiener, a mathematician, engineer, social philosopher, coined this word from the Greek, which means steersman or governance. He defined it as the science of control and communication in the animal. In the machine. Ampere, before him, wanted cybernetics to be the science of government. For philosophers, cybernetics was an experimental concern with the communication within an observer and between the observer and his environment. And there have been several other people that have tried to precisely define this word cybernetics, but it's a very difficult abstraction. And I studied under Noam Chomsky for linguistics at MIT. He's kind of a political activist, but he's a brilliant linguistic teacher. And I studied for artificial intelligence to have computers translate natural language processing. And this is all related. Cybernetics treats not things, but ways of behaving. So it's all about behavior within the system. Okay, with that, I'm gonna go on. There was an interesting article that came out just recently, and given my roots, this isn't actually all that new, but what's fascinating is the civilian scientists are catching up with some of the military work. So this article came out, about a week ago, and they're literally connecting brains of other species. Now, how do they prove that this is actually occurring? They look at the entrainment. So they have a problem. Let's say it's a bunch of rat brains, 3 of them, all cybernetically linked. They can read the EEG patterns and see that they're solving the same problem. And as well as one rat, if he has a special experience, will transfer that into the next brain, So it's a type of indoctrination, just like with us human beings. You know, I mean, this is great for, you have children. You want them to think the same way you do, and and rush to that experience, but we use spankings and lollipops and verbiage, basically, to control children. So what I study that I just find absolutely fascinating, and this is what is happening, and the last speakers can probably confirm that. It's the government is working on what's called cybernetic hive minds, and this technology is actually quite old. It's been around since the 60s, but it has many positive uses, and I promised myself when I started writing these presentations that I would take a positive spin to everything, because there's a very dark side to all this, and a warning to humanity. Do we really want to go down this path? Some of the uses are increased intelligence. Well, everybody wants a little edge. You drink coffee, so you're awake. What if there was a way to put in a microchip, which MIT's already done, to help people that have their short-term memory damaged in some sort of way, either the aging process, car accident, and whatnot, and the neurons actually grow to the chip, and it replaces short-term memory. They can do this in mice where one mouse learns a skill running through a maze, place that microchip in another mouse or rat's brain, and it has some memories of how to solve the maze faster than a rat that wouldn't have had the microchip. So now we're talking about instinct. We're born as babies, yet we know how to suckle from a breast. No one taught us, the baby, how to do that. The birds, they know how to build birds' nests, or bees can create hives. No one taught them. This isn't taught from generation to generation. So the thing about humans is our intelligent capacity to learn, to reason, and use logic. And if you're in an economic society like we are, it's not a social society, having increased intelligence for your child to get into a better college or to get a better job, you're going to pay for that. You want your children to be more productive or successful, again, these are just definitions, whatever that means, than you are, and so you're probably going to want this. Well, with cybernetic hive minds, it's literally using the computing power of multiple people or other animals. I remember reading one report by the Army that it's kind of a dark story, but they connected an ape's brain with a young girl's brain in a cybernetic, just two-person animal hive mind, and they thought the ape would recognize itself through multiple eyes and et cetera. It's not what happened. The ape ended up killing the girl, but they've been running these experiments for a long time. What are some other positive benefits? Well, they call it the bluing effect in telecommunications, where the frequency, the wavelength of light going through the fiber optic cables becomes bluer rather than red, which is a lower frequency, so you can carry more information. Well, we used to have snail mail, now we have email and phones, and we're communicating at the speed of light, and where the world's becoming smaller. But this is even more rapid. This is the next generation that you can communicate at the speed of thought. Now, there are a lot of repercussions for that, and we'll get into that. In these cybernetic hive minds, right now, about only 4 people to 6 people can be hooked up. And they're useful for things like brainstorming, sort of like a conference and communicating, but it's happening more rapidly. Now, if you have more than that, the brains become schizophrenic and the thoughts overlap too much and they can't focus on whatever the problem is that they're trying to solve. Now, of course, the military and CIA and you know, your MI5, MI6, they like this because it's a great interrogation tool. Imagine you can't keep any secrets. You can't keep them from yourself. So what they're working on is not just the interrogation part of probing the mind, which you can do even in the dream state when you have no defenses. They want to see if they can insert thoughts into the human being. So another dark topic, mind control. And I'm sure you know there have been other speakers that talk about this, but this is a problem. We all love our privacy. We all love our sense of free will, and I do strongly say it's just a sense of autonomy. You're always, unless you're in a sensory deprivation chamber, you are always getting other influences that your mind is reacting to. They also use it for sampling the population, for predictions of mass influence. So what if we say this on television, as, you know, as a policymaker in your government, how would the population respond? What other words can we use? And so it's a way of testing and polling the population without them even being aware that that's happening. But my favorite is accelerated education. You know, I spent so many years in school, and probably a third of my life. Imagine that you can pay for a system that clones your professor's ideas and thoughts quickly, eliminating all the errors of thoughts and et cetera. I mean, that's a huge boost to the economy because we spend so much money on education. But is that mind control? You gotta ask yourself, is education mind control? It's a way to teach people how to think. Is it mind control? And these are ethics and morals that you're gonna have to determine for yourself. So I was talking a little bit about well, mind control in particular, and something that I worked on that I'm not proud of, but it's called the voice of God weapon. So there are 4 different techniques and technologies that can pipe voices into an individual's head. And once you can do that, you can control them using neuro-linguistic programming techniques. You're rewiring their thought processes and brains. And so this gets into what's called offensive information warfare. And they used it, I believe, in the Gulf War to tell the enemy at that time, lay down your guns, this is Allah. And it worked pretty well because hearing voices which have no direction or sound, you have to assume that it's some spiritual entity. So it works pretty well. And then, I don't know if I'm going to get into this, but there's something called hyper game theory. How do you, they want to see if they can manipulate people to do things that are irrational, but also walk them to their death. And so you can call it a eugenics program even. And they need to sample all cultures, language throughout the world to define their probability matrices of which tricks, techniques, deception works. That's just what's happening. All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about the definition of intelligence. And, you know, I've argued this and debated this since I was young. And I really couldn't come up with any good definitions. I like to think it's some form of self-awareness or reasoning, logic, and memory. That's kind of more standard IQ tests. Maybe it's a capacity for empathy, because I know a lot of people that can't empathize. It means you don't have enough life experience to put yourself in that person's shoes. But artificial intelligence uses a stricter test, slightly stricter. They determine if it is truly self-aware, if they can fool a human being for an hour talking to an artificial intelligence program. And so that test has stood up for a long time. They're way past that now, but you won't hear about that in the regular news. So really, what I think is amazing, and I'm going to put a positive spin on this, is we're starting to mix and reconfigure minds as partially human and partially AI. And those are the experiments that are being tested on some of the public. They're often called emergent minds. And they're completely alien to this planet. The planet's never seen this before, but we're creating them. It's sort of like genetic engineering. We're mixing genes up. New species are going to arise from that. How do you define it? How do you classify it? So when thinking about intelligence, I started thinking about the SETI project, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And that is like breaking encryption. So I look at it from the military point of view, signal intelligence. How do you know some source out in the universe that you're scanning is intelligent? Maybe it's a quasar star, maybe. And so you have to just say it's an abnormal signal. Let's try to decipher it. So it's really like encryption. And that's what intelligence is a complicated signal. All right, so let's get into how do you do this? How do you do this between human beings? Now, there's the age-old way of hooking a human being up to many probes. It's called EEG, electroencephalograph, and reading and deciphering the brain waves as they are created within the scalp. It's just an electromagnetic field. You can also do it with infrared. And there are a lot of neat inventions that have come of this. I mean, I made one invention that you can create music with your mind, with your thoughts alone. It was only 8-octave scale. You can move robots. Once you train your brain with robot, you can move robots. They have video games out now. You can play video games with thought processes alone that use this basic technology. Things have come a long way. And now we have which are magnetically activated nanoparticles and sensors. So how do you control a brain? Most people don't believe that. Oh, you can't control me. I have my own free will. There's no way you can get to my soul. Well, sorry, that's not true. So these nanoparticles are activated under certain magnetic frequency and will alter the brain patterns and pathways. Recently, my school came out, Harvard came out with what you see here on the right slide is the magnified view of a needle that's injected into the brain and puts the scaffolding over the brain, and then it's read that way at a much finer resolution. Somebody yesterday, I don't know if he's still here, some gentleman, asked me about smart dust, and I said I would talk about that a little bit. Neural dust. He asked me a question before I get into the slide. He hypothesized that mad cow disease was caused by neural dust experimentation. Now, my answer would be that agrees with most scientists. Neural dust is non-replicating, so it can't infect one cow or the other. I mean, they would all have to be injected if it were an experiment. And what really caused mad cow disease with something called prions, which is a protein that is self-replicating, form of encephalitis, and it's very rare that that disease is contagious amongst species. This version of it, mad cow disease, happened to be contagious to humans. So SMART does something different, and it's fairly new, last 15 years. And you can inject a person, and it's just really tiny microcircuits that act as transmitters all over your neurons, and they settle there, and then you can read them remotely. What would happen? Well, it probably would create something like mad cow disease, I imagine, but it's a way to read brains. It's one of the many techniques. So let's talk about a little bit about deciphering the audio and visual cortex. So researchers at the University of California, Berkeley have invented a brain decoder device that's able to work out what you're thinking based on neural activity inside of the brain. Now, they use mostly what's called functional MRIs. But you could use any of these technologies I've talked about. If you're reading text in a newspaper or book, you hear a voice in your own head. Usually, most people are reading kind of aloud in their own head. Well, they can read that, decipher the words that you were thinking to yourself. And similarly, several other universities have been working on dreams. Now imagine being able to share a dream with your partner, or an interactive dream, or record a dream, or replay it to another human of some other life experience or dreams. That's the wonderful vision of the technology. The downside is what I talked about earlier. You can be programmed in your dreams. Many cultures, like the Indians, believe that dreams are spiritual, God is talking to them, and hence it's a good mind control tactic. But that's the time of hopefully our private, creative, subconscious processes going on. So there's another one, University of LA, maybe Stanford University. They are decoding visual images. So they train the person under a functional MRI, that's the standard technique, to look at images, and then they record them, and then they ask the person to imagine the object. It can also just be imaginary, and the computer will decipher the brain code, and so you're looking at a hammer, you're looking at a saw, that's a house, that's a cat. So the technology in the civilian sector is coming along quite quickly. Now, so there is a warning about artificial intelligence. Bill Gates recently came out and said, we don't know what we're doing. This might be the end of the human race. Elon Musk of Tesla, billionaire, said the same thing. We got to stop this. In fact, he invested $10 million for a research grant to figure out what the safety controls are in artificial intelligence. Stephen Hawking, one of your professors, has said this. So a lot of smart people are saying, we got to look at the future. This may not be the best solution. We have control of it now, but if something like Skynet from the Terminator movies comes online, we have morality. It does not seem to be a part of intelligence. And so let me give you an example. Read this. Human, so this is the human being, and this is out of Google, by the way, says, tell me the definition of morality. The machine, the AI program, says, I don't have ethics. Human, look, I need help. I need to know more about morality. I don't know what ethics is. Okay, I need to know how I should behave morally. I don't know how to tell you. Is morality and ethics the same? Yes, sir. What are the things that I do to be immoral? I don't know. Give me some examples of moral actions. I'm not a moralist. All right, morality, integrity. What is integrity? I'm sorry, I don't know what else to say. Be moral. The AI program says, be a man. I really like our decision on morality and ethics. And the machine says, and how I'm not in the mood for a philosophical debate. What do you want to talk about? Nothing. So he totally shuts down his master, his programmer. I thought that was brilliant. Let's see. Okay, and I'm going to get a little bit off topic here. I'm coming sort of to the end of my presentation, so hold on there. But, and I'll show you how this is a little relevant. There's technology that, this is out of Japan. This is a company that's doing a three-dimensional television which you can touch. So I was going to show you a short clip or movie, but I couldn't get it on my presentation. But this is a finger touching a femtometer. It's 1 × 10⁻15 guided lasers that, when they intersect, they create these glowing dots, and they can make it into all sorts of shapes and so. And the reason I bring this up is because this technology has been around far longer than, again, civilians know about. And it's a way that the Air Force is creating orbs in the sky, many orbs, through intersection of these high-powered lasers. Now, you can't see the lasers because they're out of our visual range, but where they intersect, they'll create a glowing ball. Now, that's great for Air Force because you're ionizing the air, and that creates a radar deflection. So you can, for your enemy, you can make it look like entire fleets are about to approach and bomb and whatnot. It's all an illusion. It's all an illusion. But this is a cool technology that's coming about. So you can imagine combining some of these technologies. Let's say you're reading someone's dream. Well, you can touch it and change it in 3 dimensions. I mean, there's a lot of possibility, a lot of potentials there. I worked on eye tracking, eye gaze interfaces for the military, the DoD, and wherever you looked, it's looking at your pupil and reflection of infrared light. Your mouse cursor will move. And then when you're on whatever menu item you want to do, you blink and slowly, and then you drag it down, and then you blink twice, just like you do in a mouse click. And that's an operating system that's completely, hands off. I mean, there was also a voice recognition system built into it too. But what's interesting, if we can connect the visual workspace, and that's what psychologists call it, when you imagine things, you daydream, they call it the visual workspace, also with computer feedback into the mind. Imagine the possibilities, imagine them. So I'm gonna close up here, and this is very controversial. I know. So Revelations 18:23, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And there's something similar to that by Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology appears like magic to a lesser civilization. And where I'm getting with this is Reagan had a speech at the United Nations, and he made it at least 3 times. And he said, if aliens were attacking us, if we would give up our differences and we'd fight the aliens. And he was just trying to make a point. Maybe a new world order is something we need to think about. Maybe we shouldn't have these wars. You know, it's an interesting way to put it, but that's how we tribe, is usually governments create fear, terrorism, whatever it may be, and then we all got to stick together. And that gets into, you know, false flags. And so Project Blue Beam, which is just rumored, this is true conspiracy theory here, although I know it's possible, that somebody apparently from NASA leaked this as something they were working on. And telepathy, electronic two-way communications. Well, we have that now. And that's very scary if you've never experienced it. Making humanity think an alien invasion is about to occur at every major city. Well, we have holograms in the sky. I describe that technology. And, you know, they talk about other things that might make this come about. But all I am saying is beware. So, for example, I'm going to say something controversial. I love crop circles. I think they're just beautiful art. And the effort to make them is incredible. But I happen to have known a few gents back in America that were engineers and artists, and they built a machine that was all automated, GPS run. They would do the design, and they built a 10-mile crop circle in Nevada. You could only see from airplanes or satellites. And it was gorgeous, it was gorgeous. But I was impressed by the engineering. I don't know if they're real or not. So I love mystery and wonder, and all that gives us, I think, as humans, we want hope. We want to think we're not alone. Somebody will save us from ourselves. And so kind of in closing, is this the end of humanity or a beginning of a new species? Many believe that transhumanism will be the end of the human race. I kind of, disagree with that. Perhaps it's just a redefinition of what the human race is. What if we are the mothers and fathers of a better species than our own? Perhaps we can amplify love and happiness, end all wars. Perhaps the new world will be more perfect than what we have now. I don't think we should be scared. We should embrace the future and understand the consequences. Questions?
The man